The wealth disparity in China, a divide so vast that it challenges our conventional understanding of inequality. China, a country with some of the world's largest and most developed cities, also has vast rural regions that seem like a different world altogether. The prosperity we often hear about in the West, shiny skyscrapers, high-speed trains, and technological advancements, masks the deep-rooted inequalities that millions of people face every day. Let me begin by sharing a startling statistic. In 2020, the late Chinese Premier Li Keqiang publicly acknowledged that roughly 600 million Chinese citizens, nearly half the population, live on less than 1,000 yuan a month. That's around $140. For those of us living in more developed countries, it's hard to fathom how such a vast population survives on so little. Today, I will walk you through the factors behind this inequality, the deep divide between urban and rural areas, the role of China's unique social system, and the difficulties both the elderly and young generations face. But more importantly, I want to share the human stories that lie behind these figures. Stories of struggle, resilience, and hope. China's urban-rural divide. A tale of two worlds. Imagine this. On one side we have Shanghai, a global financial hub, filled with glitzy shopping malls, a buzzing tech sector, and all the trappings of modern life. A few hundred miles away, in a small farming village, people are still living in houses built from mud bricks, and many young people have left, seeking better lives in distant cities. Those who stay are often elderly, left to tend small plots of land for a meager income. This isn't just a poetic contrast. It's a reality for millions of Chinese citizens. In cities like Shanghai or Beijing, average incomes are comparable to those in the developed West. Meanwhile, rural families, many of them farmers, live on a fraction of that. In some remote areas, basic services like healthcare and education are still severely lacking. One reason for this vast disparity is China's hukou system, a household registration system that has created a rigid divide between urban and rural residents. People born in rural areas are essentially tied to their birthplace, with limited access to the public services available in the cities. If they move to the city as migrant workers, they are often excluded from healthcare, education for their children, and other benefits that urban residents take for granted. Take Li Hua, a farmer in rural Hunan province. He worked tirelessly to send his two sons to the city for a better life. But even after they moved, they found themselves stuck at the bottom of the economic ladder, working long hours in low-paying jobs, unable to afford proper schooling for their children. Their rural hukou denied them access to city benefits. It's a common story across China. Millions of rural workers are critical to city economies, yet they remain second-class citizens in their own country. Who benefited from China's economic boom? As China's economy has skyrocketed, many have reaped the rewards, but not everyone. China's economic reform and opening up policies, starting in the late 1970s, launched unprecedented growth. Yet, much of the benefits have gone to urban professionals, state employees, and those working within the government system. Farmers and rural residents. They've often been left behind. In the 1990s, there was a saying in China that if you worked for the government, your future was secure. This was especially true in the prosperous cities. State employees enjoyed stable jobs, good pensions, and benefits that rural workers could only dream of. The urban-rural income gap widened drastically during this period, and even today, rural residents make, on average, less than half of what their urban counterparts earn. Now, imagine being a farmer in rural Sichuan, seeing your city cousins drive new cars, buy apartments, and send their children to college, while you struggle to buy enough fertilizer for your crops. Despite working just as hard or even harder, you're trapped in a cycle of poverty. This disparity has led to growing social tensions and dissatisfaction among the rural population. China's social system, a lack of fairness. To better understand this divide, we must look at China's social system, which, compared to many Western countries, lacks fairness and justice. In the United States, Europe, and many other parts of the world, citizens enjoy relative freedom to move between regions and seek opportunities wherever they choose. Social services like education, healthcare, and retirement benefits follow them, providing a safety net. In China, the hukou system makes mobility more difficult, and social services are unevenly distributed. Rural residents don't just face financial struggles. They encounter systemic barriers that prevent them from improving their situation. Whether it's access to schools, hospitals, or even job markets, the odds are stacked against them. Consider the experience of Mrs. Zhang, a migrant worker in Guangzhou. For over a decade, she worked in factories, earning just enough to send money back to her parents in their rural village. But when she fell ill, she had no access to the city's healthcare system. With no official urban registration, her medical costs skyrocketed. Compare this to someone in Germany or Canada, where healthcare is more accessible regardless of your background. China, a difficult place for the elderly and the young. This inequality isn't just about income, it's also about opportunity and dignity. As China rapidly ages, the country is becoming less friendly to its older population. Pensions and social services are often insufficient, especially for rural residents. In one remote village in Gansu province, I met Mr. Wang, an elderly farmer who was still working the fields at the age of 70. With no pension to rely on and his children unable to support him, he has no choice but to keep working. His story is echoed across rural China, where elderly people often live in poverty, unsupported by a social safety net. For the younger generation, the challenges are different but equally daunting. China's youth face intense competition for a limited number of high-paying jobs, particularly in urban areas. And while some succeed, many more do not. This has led to a growing movement among Chinese youth called lying flat, tongping, where young people opt out of the high-pressure job market and refuse to participate in the relentless pursuit of success. Ms. Liu, a recent college graduate from Wuhan, is one such example. Despite her degree, she struggled for months to find a decent job in the city. After working for low wages in a temporary position with no benefits, she decided to lie flat, moving back to her parents' rural home and choosing a simpler life. Her frustration with the lack of opportunity and the overwhelming pressure to succeed is shared by many of her peers. So, where does China go from here? China's wealth disparity and social inequality are the result of both policy and history. Reform is possible, but it requires addressing the deeply entrenched systems like the hukou and creating a more equitable distribution of resources. While China has made remarkable strides in its economic development, the challenge now is to ensure that growth benefits everyone, not just the privileged few in the cities. As we reflect on these stories, of farmers, migrant workers, and young graduates, it becomes clear that real change will require a more just and inclusive system. Perhaps we can look to Western models, where social safety nets and progressive policies help narrow the gap between rich and poor. China's future depends not just on economic growth, but on ensuring that all of its people, urban and rural, young and old, share in the benefits.